Hello, welcome back. Um, it's been a while. I've taken a couple days. I was kind of exhausted. You ever have one of those weeks where it's just so tiring? Well, that was my week. So we're back with chapter 26 of Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. The goal is to finish it by Halloween, but I'm realizing with what is it today? The 27th. We have 4 days left, and I have 210 pages left to read. So might not get there. I'm gonna just try and read as much as I can for now, but we'll see what happens. I might do it just in a few smaller segments. So, yeah. I don't remember what happened in the last one. Mrs. Gardner came by. I just saw that on the last page. I do remember about Charlotte Lucas being bit. Anyways, we'll figure it out. Chapter 26. Mrs. Gardner's caution to Elizabeth was punctually and kindly given on the first favorable opportunity of speaking to her alone. After honestly telling her what she thought, she thus went on. You are too sensible a girl, Lizzie, to fall in love merely because you are warned against it, and therefore I am not afraid of speaking openly. Seriously, I would have you be on your guard. I have nothing to say against him. He has felled many a zombie, and if he had the fortune he ought to have, I think you could not do better. But as it is, you must not let your fancy run away with you. My dear aunt, this is being serious indeed. Yes, and I hope to engage you to be serious likewise. Well, then you need not be under any alarm. I will take care of myself, and of Mr. Wickham too. He shall not be in love with me, if I can prevent it. Elizabeth, you are not serious now. I beg your pardon. I will try again. I am a warrior, madame, survivor of the 36 chambers of Shaolin, beholder of the scrolls of Ganjantan. Sorry for mispronouncing that. I do not seek love, and at present I am not in love with Mr. Wickham, though he is, beyond all comparison, the most agreeable man I ever saw, in form, character, and musketry. However, I see the imprudence of an attachment with one so deeply in want of fortune. I will not be in a hurry to believe myself his first object. When I am in company with him, I will not be wishing. In short, I will do my best. Perhaps it will be as well if you discourage his coming here so very often. At least, you should not remind your mother of inviting him. You know, my mother's idea as to the necessity of constant company of her friends. You know my mother's ideas as to the necessity of constant company for her friends. But really, and upon my honor, I will try to do what I think to be the wisest. And now I hope you are satisfied. Her aunt assured her that she was, and Elizabeth, having thanked her for her kindness and her hints, they parted. A wonderful instance of advice being given on such a point without being resented. Mr. Collins returned to Hertfordshire soon after it had been quitted by the Gardners and Jane, but as soon as he took up his abode with the Lucases, his arrival was no great inconvenience to Mrs. Bennet. His marriage was now fast approaching, and she was at length so far resigned as to think it inevitable, and even repeatedly to say in an ill-natured tone that she wished they might be happy. I hope they might be happy. Thursday was to be the wedding day, and Wednesday Miss Lucas paid her farewell visit, and when she rose to take leave, Elizabeth, ashamed of her mother's ungracious and reluctant good wishes, and sincerely affected herself, accompanied her out of the room. As they went downstairs together, Charlotte said, I promise to write for as long as I am able. I shall depend upon hearing from you very often, Eliza. That you certainly shall. We shall often meet, I hope, in Hertfordshire. I am not likely to leave Kent for some time. Promise me, therefore, to come to Hunsford. Elizabeth could not refuse, though she foresaw little pleasure in the visit. Charlotte was already showing the early signs of transformation, though she took great care to hide them from all but the trained eye. Her skin had taken a slight paler, and her speech seemed a trifle labored. Yeah, she doesn't look so good in this picture I'm looking at here either, you know? She's, looking worse for wear. My father and Maria are coming to me in March, added Charlotte, and I hope you will consent to be of the party. Indeed, Eliza, you will be as welcome as either of them. The wedding took place, and no other The wedding took place, and no one other than Elizabeth seemed to suspect the bride's condition. Mr. Collins appeared happier than he had ever had, despite the fact that Charlotte had to be reminded to use her fork several times over the course of dinner. The bride and bridegroom set off for Kent from the church door, and everybody had as much to say or hear on the subject as usual. Elizabeth soon heard from her friend, and their correspondence was as regular and frequent as it had ever been, and that it should be equally affectionate was impossible. Charlotte's first letters were received with a good deal of eagerness. There could not but be curiosity to know how she would speak of her new home, and how she would like Lady Catherine, and how her transformation was proceeding. The house, furniture, neighbourhood, and roads were all to her taste, and Lady Catherine's behaviour was most friendly and obliging. It was Mr. Collins' picture of Hunsford and Rosings rationally softened, and Elizabeth perceived that she must wait for her own visit to there to know the rest. The only harbinger of Charlotte's unhappy fate was her ever-worsening penmanship. Oh, that's awful. Jane had already written a few lines to her sister to announce their safe arrival in London, and when she wrote again, Elizabeth hoped it would be in her power to say something of the Bingleys. Her impatience for the second letter was as well rewarded as impatience generally is. Jane had been a week in town without either seeing or hearing from Caroline. She accounted for it, however, by supposing that her last letter to her friend from Longbourn had by some accident been lost. My aunt, she continued, is going tomorrow into that part of town, and I shall take the opportunity of calling in Section 4 Central. She wrote again when the visit was paid, and she had seen Miss Bingley. I did not think Caroline in spirits, were her words, but she was very glad to see me, and reproached me for giving her no notice of my coming to London. I was right, therefore. My last letter had never reached her. I inquired after her brother, of course. He was well, but so much engaged with Mr. Darcy that they scarcely ever saw him. I found that Miss Darcy was expected to dinner. I wish I could see her. My visit was not long, as Caroline and Miss Hunt were going out. I dare say I shall see them soon here. Elizabeth shook her head over this letter. Jane was a fine killer, but a deficient judge of character. Indeed, her only weakness was her too giving heart. Elizabeth was quite convinced that Caroline Bingley had no intention of telling her brother about the visit, or even Jane's being in town. Once again, her thoughts turned to the satisfaction of seeing Miss Bingley's last rubies pour from her neck and down the front of her bodice. Wow. As she predicted, 4 weeks passed, and Jane saw nothing of him. She endeavoured to persuade herself that she did not regret it, but as she could no longer be blind to Miss Bingley's inattention. After waiting at home every morning for a fortnight, the visitor did at last appear, but the shortness of her stay and the alteration of her manner would allow Jane to deceive herself no longer. The letter which she wrote to her sister will prove what she felt. My dearest Lizzie, you will, I am sure, be incapable of triumphing in your better judgment at my expense, when I confess myself I have been entirely deceived in Miss Bingley's regard for me. But, my dear sister, though the event has proved you right, do not think me obstinate if I still assert that my confidence was as natural as your suspicion. Caroline did not return my visit till yesterday, and not a note, not a line, did I receive in the meantime. When she did come, it was very evident that she had no pleasure in it. She made a slight formal apology for not calling before, said not a word of wishing to see me again, and was in every respect so altered a creature that when she went away I was perfectly resolved to follow her into the street and confront her as you suggested, and, had I been appropriately dressed for an outing, I might have. He knows of my being in town, I am certain, for something she said herself, and yet it would seem, by her manner of talking, as if she wanted to persuade herself that he is really partial to Miss Darcy. I cannot understand it. If I were not afraid of judging harshly, I should almost be tempted to demand satisfaction. But I will endeavour to banish every painful thought, and think only of what will make me happy, your affection, and the invariable kindness of my dear uncle and aunt. Let me hear from you very soon. Miss Bingley said something of his never returning to Netherfield again, of giving up the house, but not with any certainty. We had better not mention it. I am extremely glad that you have such pleasant accounts with our friends at Hunsford. Pray go see them, and with Sir William and Maria. I am sure you will be very comfortable there. Yours, etc. This letter gave Elizabeth some pain, but her spirits returned as she considered that Jane would no longer be duped, and that her focus might once again return to combat. All expectation from the brother was now absolutely over. She would not even wish for his renewal of his attentions. His character sunk on every review of it, and as punishment for him, as well as a possible advantage to Jane, she seriously hoped he might really soon marry Mr. Darcy's sister. Oops, sorry about that. As by Wickham's account, she would make him abundantly regret what he had thrown away. Mrs. Gardiner, about this time, wrote and reminded Elizabeth of her promise concerning that gentleman and required information. Elizabeth assured her that his apparent partiality had subsided, his attentions were over, and he was the admirer of someone else. The sudden acquisition of £10,000 was the most remarkable charm of the young lady to whom he was now rendering himself agreeable, but Elizabeth, less clear-sighted perhaps in his case than in Charlotte's, did not quarrel with him for his wish of independence. Nothing, on the contrary, could be more natural, and while able to suppose that it cost him a few struggles to relinquish her, she was ready to allow it. A wise and desirable measure for both, and could very sincerely wish him happy. All this was acknowledged to Mrs. Gardiner after relating the circumstances. She thus went on, "I am now convinced, my dear aunt, that I have never been much in love, for I had really experienced that pure and elevating passion. I should at present detest his very name, and with him all manner of evil. But I find my thoughts returning to the protection of our beloved England, for truly there can be no higher purpose. Indeed, the feelings of one young lady seem rather insignificant in comparison. My talents and my times demand my service, and I believe the crown more pleased to have me on the front lines than at the altar." Ooh, I wonder if she's gonna go fight. Anyways, I'm gonna pause it there. I gotta get some water and then charge my phone, actually. Anyways, because I'm filming this on my phone, if you didn't know. Anyways, that is chapter 26. Chapter 27 coming up shortly. Thank you.